Welcome, everyone, to Westcliff University's Distinguished Innovator Speaker Series, and our first speaker in that series, Ted Schilowitz, who will be presenting The Augmented Human, Exploring the Boundaries of Alternative Realities. I'm Barry Sandrew, Director of Entrepreneurship at Westcliff and your moderator, and I'm really happy that all of you are able to join us this evening. We'll get to our speaker in a moment, but first I want to briefly introduce Westcliff University to those in the webinar audience who may not be familiar with the institution. Pictured here is our campus in Irvine, California. Westcliff is an accredited private institution with approximately 3,500 students enrolled both live, online, and face-to-face on campus. There are 4 colleges: the College of Business, which offers bachelor's, master's, doctoral degrees in business administration, as well as certificate programs. The College of Education offers a BA, a master's in teaching English as a second language, the Real Intensive English program and certificate programs. The College of Law, which offers the Juris Doctoral degree and certificate programs, and the College of Technology and Engineering, which offers BS, MS degrees in IT, MS degree in computer science, and an MS degree in engineering management. For more information on the university, I invite you to visit our website at westcliff.edu, as well as Westcliff University on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. A little housekeeping before we start. You've all joined this webinar in listen-only mode, which of course means you are all muted. I welcome you to use the questions pane to participate with questions, and I'll pose as many of them to Ted as possible at the end of this presentation. And now for our speaker, Ted Schilowitz. In Hollywood, Ted is the go-to guy regarding new and disruptive technology that might influence how we are entertained. But more than that, he provides valuable insight into how immersive technology will likely change our lives in the future. As the futurist at Paramount Pictures, Ted works with studio leadership and the technology teams at Paramount and Viacom, exploring new and emerging technologies with an emphasis on virtual reality and augmented reality. Prior to joining Paramount, Ted was a futurist at 20th Century Fox, where he worked on the evolving art, science, and technology of advanced interactive visual storytelling. In fact, he was part of the creative team for the Martian VR and Wild VR experiences, which premiered at CES and Sundance as groundbreaking projects that push the envelope of virtual reality storytelling. Ted, before he went with 20th Century Fox, was an integral part of the product development team at Red Digital Cinema. He was the founding member and the company's first employee. He was awarded a technical Oscar and a technical Emmy for that innovative work. The Red One and Epic cameras are the workhorse of Hollywood today. They've made a significant impact on the motion picture industry, with many of the world's biggest blockbuster movies now being shot with these ultra high resolution digital movie cameras. And now for his topic, the augmented human, exploring the boundaries of alternative realities. Where are we today as a human race? Why is it harder and harder to unplug or get off the grid? Are we ready for the next steps in virtual and augmented reality? Ted is going to explore what connects us, what drives us, and how technology is used to communicate, entertain, and share, as well as how it creates both massive benefits and serious concerns. As we delve into and test the boundaries of the advanced tools in virtual reality and augmented reality, what does it really mean to us as humans, and what is the real power behind the technology? Ted, it's all yours.
Hi, everybody. My name
Hi.
is Ted. Don't worry, I won't wear this the whole time. I'm a big believer in modeling good behavior. And since we're under the pandemic, and who knows how long this is going to be out there and people are going to be watching it, while we're under these conditions, I'm a big proponent of people wearing masks. So I always start my presentations and speeches, and we're doing a big program with LAUSD right now where we all wear masks at the beginning and the end. So since I'm not actually there in person with you, I'll take it off and you can see my sort of, shaved a couple days ago face. But I think it's just a good idea to demonstrate that when you're have the ability to wear a mask and you're out in public, it's a good idea. So that's typically how I start. So what I'm going to do now is share my screen, and it's nice that everybody joined around 5 o'clock West Coast time. So I presume and hope that many of you have cocktails with you to enjoy the next hour. And if you don't, feel free to go get one. So I am going to share my screen now. Share screen. And now you guys should be seeing the screen full screen, correct?
Yep.
So we're going to sort of wander down an interesting path today, talking about where we sit in 2020, that I like to term the year the world went almost fully virtual. We've been headed down this path for a long time, and my friends like Barry and others that are technologists and people that tend to look a little bit out into the future sort of saw this coming, but I don't think anybody could have seen the events that have accelerated it 1,000 or so times its normal behavioral track. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today, and I'm sure there's going to be lots of comments and chat associated with that. So as we get started, I want to sort of make reference to the real futurists from back when Barry and I were kids. This was the Zoom of our day. So that's the original Zoom. Now I just want to talk for 2 or 3 minutes about video chat and the massive adoption of what we are all doing right now. There's a few hundred people on this chat with me, all interacting and watching from the technology we broadly refer to as video chat, which has, to say it has gone through the roof over the last 6 or 7 months since we've been under the pandemic conditions, is the massivest understatement of all time, right? Video calls have become as popular as voice calls, reaching almost universal adoption simply over the last 6 months. So think about how often you do video chat versus how often you do an old-fashioned phone call. Old-fashioned phone calls have almost gone the way of the dinosaur. It's actually really interesting how quickly things have changed. The demand for video conferencing has surged insanely over the last few weeks and the last few months, with just incredible statistics on how many people are using this kind of technology, because they effectively have to, right, to work and live and socialize. And so here we are in 2020. Microsoft Skype seeing massive usage, just insane statistics in terms of where we sit today. And the one that's sort of become the darling of the moment is this funny little independent company called Zoom, right? That has grown crazy. So here's just a few months ago, Zoom's valuation was larger than all of the 7 largest airlines in the world combined. It had a close to a $50 billion valuation, and all the airlines together had a valuation of 46 billion. That was in March. You want to see where we are today? It's been on fire since then. Today, Zoom has over a $125 billion market cap. That's bigger than IBM. So I should just stop for a minute and let that sink in for a minute, right? Because IBM's been around a long time. They're a real company with lots of business tentacles, lots of technical tentacles. And here's Zoom defining a new generation of communication, which now has a larger market cap than IBM. And it looks like there's no stopping, at least for now. But it could be very bubble-like, so we'll see. Here's an interesting piece of news, and you guys can decide if you like this or not. The words "you are on mute" is now the most used phrase in worldwide conversation. In the last 6 months, it's been said 4.6 billion times since March 15, 2020. Now, the truth is I just made that up. That is completely fake news. That is actual fake news. But I just thought it would be fun to see who bought that for 10 seconds. It actually might be somewhat true. That's kind of what's terrifying about this, is the level of you're on mute has definitely been said a lot, because just as we were prepping this video chat, there were 5 of us on the prep team. We said it 4 times, right? In the course of 5 minutes. So this sort of drifts into my normal talking points that I like to think about and talk about these devices, where they sit, how important they are, and how they're evolving. And that's what we're going to spend time talking about over the next 45 minutes to an hour. These days, most people check their smartphones 150 times a day. That's every 6 minutes. This is pre-pandemic, right? So everything sort of changed. The rules of the pandemic change everything. Young adults send over 100 texts per day. That's over 3,000 texts per month. There are close to 8 billion people on planet Earth. Over 5 billion of them own a cell phone, so it's the vast majority. 3 billion of those are smartphones, right? Tiny computers, not really cell phones. But only 4.2 billion people on planet Earth own a toothbrush, just to give you an idea of the odd sort of dynamic of that. If you lost your wallet in an average day, in an average world, pre-pandemic, because people aren't going out of their house much, they don't lose their wallets that much anymore. If you lost your wallet, it takes you roughly a day to report that you lost your wallet, give or take, statistically. If you lost your phone, it takes you a little over an hour to completely freak out and start reporting that it's lost and go on the hunt to try and figure out how to get it back. So these are kind of interesting statistics about the world we live in today. The last one I think is fascinating. The average number of times someone touches their mobile device is over 2,600 times a day. So just sort of let that sink in for a minute. And as you're letting that sink in, I want you to watch this short video that sort of illustrates a point.
If you're gonna be texting and walking, I'm a seeing eye person, I can help you walk and text.
Excuse me, I see you're texting. I can clear a path for you.
If you'd like to walk and text, we're here for you. Excuse me, sir. If you're gonna be texting and walking, did you grab both? Good. So you're barely paying attention.
Excuse me, pardon me, texter walking. Texter coming through.
So that was a real experiment done in New York City 6 or 7 years ago, obviously pre-pandemic. People are walking a lot. We live in a very mobile society in normal times. And this is a real thing, a real test that they were doing to demonstrate how people were simply sucked into the vortex of this as they were moving around the world. And that continues today, right? So it's just sort of worthwhile fodder to think about as we kind of move through our little journey today. Now I want to talk a little bit about the dynamics of retail and the dynamics of change, because having this odd job as a futurist for now a couple of different large motion picture studios, you study change. That's part of what you do for a living. You learn by looking at other industries, ancillary industries, and what's really going on behind the scenes or overtly in front of the scenes. So here's some interesting statistics from 2006. These are the valuations of all of these companies in 2006. And very often, people that do what I do for a living, we study things in 10-year journeys, in 10-year gaps of time. So we'll look at things over a 10-year period and we can see how much has changed. So if you're interested, if you want to see how much changed from 2006 to 2016, here you go. So the obvious thing at the very bottom is that cute little startup Amazon in 2006 that was worth, a paltry $18 billion, which is not a small sum of money for a little startup, over 10 years turned into a valuation of close to 500 billion, where almost all the other companies started to fall off a cliff in terms of traditional retail, right? Now, let's just flash forward 2 years from 2016 to 2018, and Amazon had a market cap of over $1 trillion, right? And if you're curious, if you want to see what happened with the rest of those guys, well, Sears is bankrupt, JCPenney's bankrupt, Nordstrom, Kohl's, and Macy's are hanging on by a thread. Best Buy and Target have increased a little bit because of the sales dynamics of what they're doing and their online presence and the need for this type of merchants. And Walmart is sort of fighting the good fight. They may still lose, but they're putting up a fight, right? They've grown their market cap a little bit. But still, the bajillion-pound gorilla is Amazon. And if we look at other companies sort of that have done really well during the pandemic and over the last 6 months, they all have one thing in common. They all take physical goods and services in some way, shape, and form and have figured out how to virtualize them, how to computerize them, how to make them remote access, cloud-based, compute-based services in some way, shape, or form. Some ad-supported, some product-supported, some a combination of both. But the companies that are thriving today put an emphasis on their virtual existence, not their physical existence, right? Those numbers were from the beginning of the pandemic. Here's today's version. So in that 7 months since the pandemic started, the virtual companies have exploded in their valuations. Apple is now over $2 trillion. I'm a big Mac head. I've been working with Apple and connected to Apple for 35 years now. But all these companies are doing extremely well. And our friends at Amazon at $1.5 trillion now, when in 2016 they were worth 18 billion, is quite a success story. Using a technology layer to change the world, right? So in my sort of little microcosm of that, I've been involved in technology disruption and virtualization and computerization of things that we use in the entertainment industry. I've been lucky enough to work really closely with Apple, building this thing we refer to as desktop video. I was involved with the teams doing that years ago. Then I went on to start a couple of startups and was involved in kind of a revolution in the motion picture world. If I move my computer, there's one of them sitting right there on my desk, and there's a bunch of them floating around here. So I am no stranger to the art and sort of alchemy and magic of disruption, innovation, and creativity. And that's kind of how I got the job after I retired from building all this stuff as a futurist at a motion picture studio. It's a longer story. We can do some of that in the Q&A if you want to hear more. But that's sort of the short version of my trajectory through production into technology, and then out of technology and starting to look at how we use technology broadly. So that's kind of what I do. And as we dance that dance, there we go. So as Barry mentioned at the beginning, over the last now, I guess we're getting close to 10 years, I worked for two major motion picture entities that have been around for a while. Fox was around for 83 years. They got absorbed into Disney, so they are no longer an entity anymore. Paramount is the grandfather of all of them, over 100 years being in the motion picture business. And I work in this strange dynamic where all I get to do all day long, every day, is ask one simple question. Can a company that's been around this long find ways to act like a startup? That vein could be a whole nother hour talk. But just to sort of encapsulate that into a minute or so, what I try and do is make all the executives that I work with and all the production teams and all the post-production teams and all the technical teams and all the creative teams aware of what's happening, why it's happening, and how small little companies will come in and disrupt, cannibalize, and ultimately destroy them unless we innovate, disrupt, and think about ways to act and be more like a startup. So that's, at the end of the day, that's what I do for a living. So what I want to talk about today, so that's kind of like act one of this little discussion, right? It's like the precursor of where we're headed. And as Barry mentioned, I am focused a lot on the evolution of the visual experience, because that's what a futurist does at a movie studio. So a big part of my thesis and a big part of my study is very, very simple and very overt. I am studying the evolution of the screen and the stories that evolve, how we evolve technology and how we move this forward. So I ask a very simple question. If we were doing this in person with a big audience, this would be a little Q&A part, so you guys could experience this with chat or do it any way you want. But if you look at those three TVs from your great-grandparents, your grandparents, and your parents, And then you look at the TV you likely have in your home. I would ask the question, more the same or more different? And sometimes I get different answers, but at the end of the day, after we debated a little while, we all kind of come upon the same answer, that the device on the right there, at least my right as I'm looking at it, is more the same than the devices that have come before it. It's effectively the same thing. It's a big rectangle or a square. Now, arguably, it's thinner. It's much, much larger. It has much more color and has much more connectivity. It's effectively a giant computer screen that pretends to be a TV, but it's really the same thing as all the generations before it, right? And if we look at the compute world, same answer applies. We've made things more nimble. We've made things more sophisticated, but the form factor and functionality of the devices we use to entertain ourselves, socialize, and be productive are effectively the same for many, many generations. And in fact, we're all doing it right now. We're all looking at some sort of rectangular screen, unless some of you happen to be doing this in VR, which might be possible, but we're doing this in a traditional way. And I'm going to talk about the non-traditional way soon. We're all looking at rectangles or squares, right? And we've been doing this our entire life. It is very ingrained in our visual DNA. So making changes to that is a big deal, and it's hard. This piece of technology, while still a traditional screen with traditional form factor, added a new little twist: pure and total mobility. We now had the ability over the last, call it 15 years, to carry our compute, our visual experience, and everything associated with it in our pocket. And if you look at the way that these mobile devices have developed over the years, essentially they've gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, while thinner and thinner and thinner. They've figured out a way to make the compute processing as thin and small as possible, while the screen gets bigger and bigger with the limitation of how big can we possibly make it to make it comfortable enough to still fit in your pocket or your purse. And really, we've gone over the falls because some of the phones are so big, they don't really fit in your pocket anymore, right? But that was a much bigger deal than a lot of people realize. Similar screen, still a rectangle, still a square, but mobility mattered to the tune of multiple trillions of dollars in revenue cycles. So as we kind of continue down that theme, I like to refer to this next piece of discussion as the digital metaphor, right? And it's actually a very simple thing. Is everything, for the most part, that we do on a day-to-day basis is now some version of television. We have figured out how to TVize every single thing that we do for the most part, other than maybe some biological things, right? And sleeping. So if you look at just these pictures and you think about, well, we used to write mail on paper and send it physically. Now we just do TV mail, right? We either do it on a laptop or we do it on a little mobile device that pretends to be a real thing, but it's just TV. When we read things, we used to read physical books and newspapers. Now we just stick them on TV, on a tablet or a Kindle. When we socialize or gossip, we used to do that in person. Now we do it with Facebook and Instagram and others, and TikTok and other social media. We just turned it into TV. For those that are old enough as me, you remember in a car opening up a physical map, trying not to kill yourself, and using physicality. And those that live in the Los Angeles area remember something fondly or not so fondly called the Thomas Guide, which we used to use as a physical representation of how to get the hell around LA. All we did over the last 30 years is figure out a way to shove it into a TV, right? Whether that's the navigation screen in your car or the mobile phone that you stick in a little holder. We just made it TV. One of the most giant economic impacts, if we go back to Act 1 when we talked about Amazon, the reason why Amazon makes so much money is they figured out how to leverage TV. All Amazon is TV shopping at its most evolved form. They just turned shopping into some version of television. We're all doing socialization and learning in a version of TV. We're all just doing TV right now, right? And a generation or two ago, if you wanted to be on TV, it was hard. Like you had to go to a TV station, you had to be a TV news person or a TV personality. These days, almost everyone on the planet has the ability with technology to be on TV. I'm on TV right now talking to you, right? And I do this all the time. And you do it all the time too, with groups of 2 people, 5 people, 10 people, 20 people, whatever your groups are. So at the end of that piece of thought, there's still something going on. And I referred to it a few slides ago, a few discussion points ago. Everything that we're talking about is still trapped in this rectangular form. Almost everything we do from the minute we wake up to the minute we go to sleep has been turned into some version of TV and stuck in a box, stuck in a rectangle, right? So as we move through our little discussion here, I ask a very simple question, right? There's my first Mac from 30 years ago. Here's my Mac today, more the same than different. In fact, if you took this screen and stuck it in front of a Mac SE, believe it or not, it'd be almost the same size if you put it horizontally. It's just that we shrunk everything else, right? And we made it pocket size. But it's really the same thing. And it does functionally the same thing. We can type on it. We can do graphics on it. Of course, it's way more sophisticated. And we have layers and layers of things we can do on a smartphone we couldn't do on a Mac. But I think you get the point, right? Functionally, it does the same thing. The reason why there's a question mark there is for the first time, we are starting to study and look at what does it look like to not be stuck in this rectangle anymore. So I ask this very simple question to the people watching this on YouTube a year from now or whatever. Are we ready to break out of this rectangle that we are consistently in all day long, every day? It's an interesting question, right? So the thesis, now we're into Act 3. Why we're gonna wear it. Because once you start to understand how to break out of that rectangle, we start to understand where our visual system actually is and the separation of all those rectangles to our eyes. And if we doesn't need to be a rectangle anymore, maybe we're gonna start to figure out how to wear it instead of hold it, wear it instead of sit it on a desk or sit it on our lap. We're gonna see, now we're kind of entering the futuristic part of the talk, right? So back in the days when I used to travel all over the world, which was last year, hopefully sometime again in the next few years, I like to take a lot of pictures, just like a lot of people do on my smartphone. This was from a trip to China. And if you look at something going on with all these people, I just snapped these pictures as I was running around China, giving some presentations and meeting with some technical companies. And look at what all those people are doing all day long. They are just staring down at this little magic box and trying to shove it up on their face as much as they can. I mean, if I was pointing and you could see the kid that I'm pointing to with the big muff headsets, that was on a subway in Beijing. And he was watching that screen the entire subway ride, which was like 2 hours, with the 14-hour battery pack, right? Probably playing Fortnite. You think that kid's got neck and back problems already? He's like probably 14 years old, right? So we're all just trying to figure out how to wear it because we figured out how to hold it and it's not a phone anymore, it's a little TV. So we try and figure out how to wear it. This was some photos I took in an airport in a part of China called Qingdao in sort of northeast China. And this is some famous soccer player. If you're a big soccer guy, you would know who he is. That's a huge cell phone company in China. And see if you could tell me, like, what are they telling you in this ad, right? Very, very clearly, if they had written a subcaption on this ad, it would basically be saying, this is not a phone. This is a little TV that we want you to shove up on your face, right? So that's where we sit today. I took these pictures in Korea because I thought it was adorable, right? Of this little girl. And I thought to myself as I was watching this, because she's so young and so malleable, if you gave her a different kind of device, a different kind of visual device that was more evolved than that little TV that her parents had stuck up against the juice cup, right? Would she be okay with it? Would she embrace it? Would she look back at this thing as the most ridiculous, idiotic form factor of all time if you gave her something better? Okay, so that's where we're going to go next. So as you might imagine, we're going to talk about this thing called virtual reality for a little while. Now, virtual reality as a industry and as a theme for the next 10 minutes of this discussion is not a new thing in any way, shape, or form. Virtual reality's been around for a while. In fact, theme parks in all their shapes and forms understand virtual reality because they create simulations at scale. They don't necessarily slap boxes on people's faces, but they create simulations for a living. So if you looked at these magazines, this was in like the mid 90s, 1994, 1995, VR goes mass market, which of course didn't quite happen, right? Not in any way, shape, or form, because it wasn't quite ready to go mass market. The concept was starting to get ready, but the technology, form factor, the use case, all the people working on this were nowhere near mature enough to pull this little trick off. So that was the mid 90s, okay? Now let's flash forward to the late 90s and something that was really instrumental in my world in terms of my first touch of head-mounted simulation behavior. And this little clip that I found on YouTube was really hard to find. So you got to give me a little credit because I had to search forever to find it. It was like a true crime novel, like having to hunt this thing because I knew it existed somewhere and I finally found it. So I want you to watch this.
Hello, I'm Michael Eisner. I'm here in the virtual reality studio where Disney Imagineers are creating a whole new world of storytelling. Tiny TV screens inside this headset actually allow you to step into the world of Aladdin on a magic carpet ride. It's called virtual because it's a world which only exists inside a computer. Reality because unlike film or television, you see not just what's on the screen, but what's above, around, and behind you. And you control when you return to the real world. I wonder where the exit is. Oh well, welcome to the wonderful world of Disney.
So early in my life, early in my career, I actually grew up in Florida. I worked at Disney as a kid. I was involved in production at Disney for many, many years. I worked with Michael Eisner off and on doing production work. And they created the first indoor theme park using technology. It was something called Disney Quest. And it was an experiment to see if they could take theme parks and proliferate them all around the world in shopping malls and other kinds of places. They built a virtual reality system that took you on the Aladdin magic carpet ride in the late 90s. Now, keep in mind, as you see in some of these pictures, the device was as big as a bowling ball and it had to be counterbalanced on your head because it weighed 14 to 15 pounds on your head. And the cost of each device to build, the visual part of it was $500,000 per device. And the computer it took to run each one of these rigs was a SGI Onyx. At the time, that was $1 million computer. So each rig, each little ride vehicle per person was a $1.5 million investment. And you could only put a few people in it, right? It wasn't like a big simulator ride. So it technically succeeded massively, and it still took a huge part in my brain of really understanding where simulation entertainment was going, but it was not a successful business yet. That was in the late 90s. Now let's flash forward 20 or so years. This is a trip that I made to Japan, and this is me in a very popular Nintendo game called Mario Kart that I imagine a lot of people played, but you might have never played it this way. So here we are wearing headsets. That's one of my friends from Japan. There's my daughter on the lower screen. And we are literally inside Mario. Like we are driving the cars. It's full-on simulation. The difference between the economics of this and 20 years ago is those headsets are now just a few $100s. The computers to power them are $1,000 or so dollars. And the ride vehicle stuff is the most expensive part of it. So there are these little places popping up all over starting to experiment with virtual reality entertainment outside of the home. We call them location-based entertainment. Most all of this is, of course, on pause for the pandemic, which is very difficult for a lot of these companies, but we hope at some point we'll sort of find our way out of it and they're going to start their businesses again. So in 20 years, a lot changed, but a lot really didn't change. You're still wearing this big clunky thing on your face. It just didn't cost $500,000 anymore, right? So let's kind of look at some of the statistics about these things that we call virtual reality in that sort of 20-year later world. So in 2016, roughly 6 million of these suckers were shipped. In 2017, it boosted up to 8. In 2018, 13 million or so. Last year, 2019, we got to 17 million. And now the trajectory is starting to find its uptick, right? There are a lot of people criticizing that VR wasn't catching on and it wasn't happening. But there were so many challenges and so many friction points with these devices that people that were really involved in it on a day-to-day basis, like me, knew exactly where these numbers would sit, and these numbers were borne out by our predictions They are modest but valuable because it showed that enough people would adopt them and learn from them, that we were going to see, as we remove the friction points and as we start to simplify the systems, we're going to start to see real uptick on these devices. At the end of the day, these things still have a fatal flaw. There's still a box on your face, right? And I've got them all sitting around here. Here's one right here. They're floating all around my world in various ways. So part of the challenge with these things is the physical form factor is this, right? You've got to wear this big clunky box on your face. That's just a today problem, not a forever problem. We're going to talk about that in the next few minutes. So some predictive analysis to this by a lot of these different companies that sort of do like analysis of business segments and stuff is this was sort of the prediction in 2017 as to where it was going to go. By 2020, you know, people thought maybe 30 or so million, and by 2022, we're going to see 50 or 60 million of these things. Maybe not exactly right, but starting to get right enough, right? And there's some other sort of pieces of this study. This one was wholly wrong, and I think for good reason. I mean, it comes from a real magazine, Fortune, right? But someone predicted in 2016 that by 2020, we'd sell over 200 million of these boxes on your face. Me and others working in this industry knew that there was no way that was going to be the number. It was going to be maybe a tenth of that. And that was exactly kind of where it ended up, 20 or so million, right? Certainly not 200 million. This one was an interesting prediction, right? Back in 2016, this group called Futurist thought that, okay, they were going to sell 5 million. And by 2020, they thought maybe 68 million. It's not really wrong, but it's kind of an order of magnitude wrong. We're sort of like a little less than half of that. This one is probably the most correct, right? 2021, we're probably going to get 25 to 30. The pandemic has accelerated that, and I'm going to show you some examples of that. By 2023, 2024, we're going to probably crack the 30 to 40 million devices of this ilk, of this style sold per year, which is a actually fairly encouraging number for anybody that's interested in the idea of expanding past the rectangle, right? So I'd like to talk about this for a minute. And I mentioned Nintendo a second ago. This was a very important part of an understanding of where home entertainment was going. And if I was in an actual crowd now, I would ask who here owned a Wii and played a Wii. And if it was a pretty big group, almost everyone would raise their hand. This was important because this was not just a video game. This was spatial simulation entertainment for your home. So you weren't just playing video games in your living room anymore. Nintendo figured out that they could bring simulation into the video game world for the home. So you could literally let grandma bowl in the living room. You could play soccer and boxing, and you could do sport things in the living room, and they kept evolving it with a pad called the Wii Fit. They kept sort of working on how to simulate what you would do in the real world, in the video game world, and this was a commercial success, a commercial hit, right? Now I want to flash forward to today, this device here, and I want you to look at their marketing video when they launched this a couple years ago, right? And the kind of things you would do when you're wearing the device as opposed to watching the device as a flat screen. Now, let's just scooch over here and watch the launch video from the Nintendo 25 years before that. You see some similarities in what they're doing? Right? It's the same thing, right? This is a modern version of the Nintendo Wii, where the screen has gotten better, but the concept of how you do this stuff is the same, right? They turned home entertainment into a simulation. So look at what it looks like, right? It's the same stuff. You can bowl in the living room. You can shoot up people in the living room. You can play tennis in the living room, except it feels more real now than just a TV sitting on the wall. That's the power of virtual reality, and that's why it's going to be big, and why a company like Facebook invested billions and continues to invest billions and billions of dollars per year to bring this to the world. So you get a real VR headset now for under $400. The computer is packed inside the headset, not as a separate device. There's no more wires, and it's inexpensive, right? This has become a big deal. This is one of the most popular games in VR. It's called Beat Saber. That's what it looks like. And it's kind of like a Wii game, except you're inside the game, right? Chopping blocks to music. So it's kind of like a mixture of Dance Revolution and some sort of like Wii Tennis, or Wii Boxing, right? And this game became so popular in VR that Facebook bought the company. So now this is a Facebook company, this game. As we start to look at this world, during the pandemic, the device that everybody wants, because most of the components in the build are made from China, no one could get it. They were sold out all over the world, right? The best VR device is hard to find at the worst time. That was pandemic VR, the challenge of pandemic VR. So now I want to take a little moment to reflect on what we just talked about for the last 10 minutes. And you remember that I mentioned the rectangles and the squares, right? How we've been trapped in that rectangle forever. Think about everything that you've done, with limited exception: reading books, looking at television, looking at art, looking at things. They're always in some sort of bounded box, right? So if we're going to make a change, and these devices are sort of the first agent of change that are starting to find their first business case, it would sort of be like me asking everybody that's watching and telling you that for your entire life, you've had drinks out of things like this: a mug, a glass, something that holds water. Now I'm going to tell you that we figured out a way that you can still drink way better, but your new glass won't look anything like this anymore. It's a huge mental change, which requires a fairly significant leap of faith, which is why these things aren't adopted almost instantly. Because we've been looking at squares forever. And now someone's developed screens that are no longer a square, that you can look around in simulation world and everything you see is where you point the device. And that's a really big deal. So with all of that, there's a lot of success that has already been proven, right? Millions of dollars in revenue being generated. There are companies making money doing this, right? And $100 million of revenue made through these games. So we're just getting started and companies are starting to make money. So they start to realize there is a future to this. Now, a couple of weeks ago, the second generation of this device, which I've already tested, and I've got two coming, they should actually be here this week, is now cheaper and better. The screens are better, it's lighter, it's got a more modern processor, and now for under $300, you can get this. So it's a new processor, way better resolution on the screen, and lighter weight. And as you might imagine, they are completely and totally sold out. So if you didn't order it in the first 15 minutes of them going on sale, you're out of luck for a while. That's how popular they are. Part of what's going on with the pandemic is that we're all sort of trapped inside, right? And we go out occasionally for things, but we're inside. So there's a lot of things going on in terms of what can you do with a device like this. So I just call this pandemic VR. One of the things you can do is exercise with it.
Hey, I'm Leanne. Welcome to Lake by Call. Take a moment and just look at this place. Today's workout is all about finding that moment of appreciation. We are really going to get ourselves into the present moment. One of the easiest ways to do that when you start to get overwhelmed is to just take a breath and...
So some friends of mine create this game. It's called Supernatural. It lives inside that VR headset. Think about it kind of like Peloton in VR. You've got trainers, and this is what the experience looks like. It's kind of like the Beat Saber game, except you actually get exercise. I do it like 3 days a week.
All right, where's that breathing happening? Try to let it come from the belly here.
So you do your squats, you do all your training. There's also simulation experiences like boxing.
Yes.
And different kinds of boxing that are really true simulations. I do this maybe once or twice a week. It's a full-on boxing experience.
I'm calming myself down in between rounds and fights. And then while I'm in the fight, when I step back, I practice a little bit better breathing. And
so you get the idea. So that's the fun stuff, right? Now, VR as a use case is also starting to find its way into the things that we do in video chat to kind of advance the art and science of video chat. So we are now using virtual reality for social collaboration and work collaboration, and a number of companies, I've pulled a couple of them here, are doing this. This company on the lower right, Spaces, just got bought by Apple a few weeks ago, so who knows what they're going to do with it. And Facebook themselves has a work and social collaboration software called Horizons that they're just getting ready to release into the world. I want to show you some of this kind of so you can see what it feels like.
I'm in a VR headset. We support more than 15 different VR headsets. Pretty much if you've got a headset that plugs into a computer, we support it. I have 2 VR controllers in my hands, and I can use those controllers to
like this
work with the world.
Fine, right?
Exactly. So I'm inside VR, and I'm broadcasting out of VR into video chat. And I'll explain a little.
Here's what it looks like. Here's Brad in real life.
Let's go to camera 1 here so you get a pretty good alignment. Hi. And so what you're now seeing is Brad in his, gym shorts, but Brad also in his professional tech bro hoodie and skinny jeans here in VR.
So you get that, right? Now things get even more advanced when you start mixing mediums and you start using mixed reality and virtual reality, which is what we're going to talk about next. So this is a company that's growing really fast called Spatial that allows a mixed reality experience to be used for collaboration. So I'm going to show you a couple of snippets of some of the testing that we've done with this.
Recording. Okay, I'm now recording. So there's my friend Bree who works for Spatial, and there's my buddy Elliot who works for Well Played. And the 3 of us are all spatially inside a collaboration environment. So Bree, since you work for Spatial, maybe you want to give a little 30-second intro about what we're doing.
Sure, absolutely. So Spatial is an augmented and virtual reality platform for collaboration. So of course we are all in different locations, and we can hang out, meet, collaborate around really any topic. So
I was wearing that headset looking at her. In this next clip, this is my friend Elliot wearing a VR headset looking at her from his perspective.
And what's happening is, as you're doing that, I'm walking around what you're doing as if this would really be in the real world. So way different than a video chat or some sort of web application. I'm literally seeing the backpack as a 3D object. I'm walking up close to it. I'm backing up to see your relation to it. I was watching you annotate. You're basically duplicating what we would do if we were actually in a showroom demo trying to figure out how to market and sell this backpack.
Right, I could even, make it, let's see, that's about me sized. Go here and try it on.
And try it on.
Pin it still. Okay, so I'm gonna pin this 3D model and then I'll walk up to it. I'll try it on. Is that about right?
Yep, that's it. You got it.
So if we can't do things in the real world because of the pandemic, this is kind of the next best thing. And in some ways, maybe it's a better thing, right? Because my commute to that showroom was putting on a headset as opposed to getting in the car and driving halfway across town. Here's the third part of this.
So I wanted to pull out this flower, and then because I'm in the Hollands, I can also just pick it up and hand it over to you.
And I can grab it.
Pull these out.
Yeah, I can take it and grab it. So now I've taken it with the controller.
Wow.
And I'm moving it around so I can put it on my couch. Blink. And I can grab these and put them also on the couch.
As well as
there we go.
adding notes. So anything that I say is going to go on to this sticky note. I can say, "Hi, Ted," and it'll all be recorded here.
Right. That's great.
You get a sense.
So I think
there's people that use this for, all sorts of types of meetings and getting content.
So you get a pretty good sense of the value of this, right? And we're just getting started. We're just trying to figure out how do we use technology way beyond a traditional screen. Okay, so last part of our talk is we gave some little precursor clues about this thing called augmented or mixed reality. So that's what we're going to talk about next. This is another sector of the simulation world where we actually use the real world and the digital world and we marry them together. And we've already been doing this for quite some time in our traditional screens. If you're a sports fan of any way, shape, or form, you see how we layer graphics and video as if it were actually on the field. And that's augmented or mixed reality, right? So like if you brought your great grandparents back to a football game on TV, first of all, they'd look at that TV and they'd be like, wow, that's a really gigantic TV. Second of all, they would see all that stuff on the field and you would say, oh yeah, grandpa, all of that stuff, the first down lines and all those graphics and all those things, that's not really on the field. Like it's a magic trick. We just put it on there and it looks like it's on the field. And he would look at you and he'd be like, that's witchcraft. Like, that's not possible. Like, it's not actually there, but it's actually there, right? That's kind of what would happen. But remember where we sit, still in that traditional screen. Now, think about how we break out of that screen in mixed reality, and this power gets unlocked exponentially. So this is what I like to talk about as beyond the box on the face. It starts to look like something maybe you'd wear someday. None of these are really there yet, but we're on the curve to something that might make sense that you would really wear. And this, the pretty supermodel there in the middle has a set of glasses on that kind of look like glasses, right? So we're starting to get there. We're starting to figure out that maybe glasses might be something where our next compute platform is going to live, maybe. And I and people like me aren't the only ones that are saying this. So if you recognize that guy, that's Mark Zuckerberg, who invested billions in VR. 4 or 5 years ago, we go to this big VR conference every year in San Jose. This year we did it virtually on a video chat. He came out and he said, I'm a guy that's invested billions of dollars into this form factor, and this is not the future of my company in this world. This, things that look like eyeglasses, is the future of VR, AR. He said that 4 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, on stage in front of God and everybody, right? So let's think about what this means. We've already figured out this stuff, right? We've figured out how to do the ears, right? We can make sunglasses that have headphones in them. And these little guys, I'm sure a lot of people that are watching this have these, right? Have these little earbuds, which I use on an almost daily basis, right? Here's the fascinating thing about this. If we study this and we know the kind of input output we can get from our ears and the fact that where does the sound live? Well, it's here, right? So if we start to think about the power that's unlocked here and the power that's getting ready to be unlocked here, when we figure this out, this is going to be exponentially larger than the earphone business. Now, let's look at how big the earphone business is. If Apple, that funny little fruit company in Cupertino, decided to split this off as its own little separate business and just sell this, right? This alone as a business would be the 31st or 32nd largest company on planet Earth, just selling these. Because they're going to sell 100+ million of these things this year, right? Which means that it would have a valuation of like 175, 180 billion. Of course, what's scary is Zoom has that almost valuation too, but it would be a humongous company just on its own. That's just the ears, right? So for the last 35 years, we've been trying to figure out how to get the eyes right. None of these are right, but there's a lot of people investing billions of dollars in trying to figure this out, right? That's literally a collection of almost every headset. I've got them all around here too. Like here's the prototype version here. You know, there's lots of them floating around my little world. But none of these are right? These are getting a little more right, and I'm going to show you as we get even more right over time. So this is the device. This is the newer generation that I'm wearing. This is the older generation. It's thousands of dollars, for $3,500, but it's powerful and it's showing us a future. So I'm wearing the prototype HoloLens 2, which is pretty fantastic for a number of reasons. Ergonomics and comfort, the fact that I can flip it up to see you. It's got a much wider field of view horizontally and more importantly, vertically.
so that the natural visual system is more visually logical in this. And as I touch things, it's a more natural approach to touching things. So I'm literally choosing things and picking things and opening a menu and hopping into things just by doing that. So this is most definitely a glimpse into the future of where a visual compute system looks, feels, exists, and starts to become real, starts to become something you would think about using on a daily basis instead of a flat physical screen either sitting on your desk or holding in your hands. This is most definitely a vision of the future that is starting to become very real now.
So that's one approach that's out in the market, mostly used for industrial purposes and business purposes, right? It's big, it's clunky, but it's super powerful. Here's another approach.
And I'm wearing the latest incarnation of the Nreal mixed reality glasses. Super lightweight, feels like glasses, looks like glasses. I'm looking at a super high resolution mixed reality world, looking at all kinds of demos, all running off USB-C off a mobile phone. So the device connects, runs power, gets everything it needs from the phone to an ultra lightweight wearable device that feels like glasses on your face.
So that's what these are, right? These are coming. And yes, they're not something you're really going to wear yet every day, but they're starting to chip away at the problem, right? And these things are starting to get more and more real. And this is light enough that you could wear it for a while. I mean, you'd look kind of weird, but you could wear it for a while. So our friends at Facebook, that company that's got billions into VR, has really started to go all in on this kind of stuff, right? They're moving divisions, they're changing their employees, they're moving folks out of virtual reality into mixed reality. They're moving beyond this box on face form factor, and they're kind of investing a lot of money and time into it. There were some announcements literally last week around this, that by 2021, Facebook will have their first glasses form factor device. This is a research device that they showed to the world.
What do we put on the glasses? I mean, think of all the things necessary for AR to work. Outward sensors that can interpret the world, inward sensors that can track your eye movements and know where to show you information, and computers to process just all of that. And then, assuming you could fit everything you need into a pair of glasses, how would they perform under different light conditions or different weather conditions?
Right? So there's lots of stuff you can read online about these, but they're on their way, and they've got essentially unlimited capital to figure it out. So if they've got enough smart engineers, maybe they'll figure it out. On the other side, you heard me off and on mention my friends at Apple. I have a long sort of standing connection history with them. I've got all kinds of devices, including these from the early days, if anybody remembers that little guy. But so what I'm going to tell you now for the next like 2 or 3 minutes is nothing that I know or don't know about where Apple is going with this. This is literally rumors you could find online and stuff that's out there, fodder for you to think about, right? So all just speculation, nothing I'm telling you based on anything I know or don't know. It's important for me to state that for obvious reasons. I think a lot about this thing that I'm wearing on my wrist, because this thing that I'm wearing on my wrist is an incredible little micro supercomputer that effectively is a small version of everything that they've shoved into here for the most part, except it lives on my wrist all day long. It doesn't get hot, it doesn't make any noise, and it's incredibly small and incredibly powerful. So all I'm asking you to do here is take a little leap of faith with me. So think about all the things that they've been able to shove in a little 1x1 inch square that you wear on your wrist. Now, imagine giving it a little more real estate, right? Here and here, because this is already fully capable. It's a giant little computer that sits on your wrist. Take this form factor and spread it out on about 3.5 times the form factor, and you can start to maybe think about where this might be going. Same as Facebook, it's very public that Apple is doing this, right? There's all kinds of reports about who they're hiring, why they're hiring, all the companies that they picked up, all the patents they filed in this world. Tim Cook has been very public about his passion around mixed reality. It's a real thing, right? Like, this is not a secret. You can figure this out, right? This is news from just this past week. Apple is doing augmented reality content tied to their Apple TV platform, right? Google's also doing it. Samsung's also doing it. All the big boys are doing this stuff, right? This is a little clue, this little video that I think is something that will give you a pretty good sense of where it might be headed.
So one of the reasons I have a pretty good instinct that Apple is getting deeply involved in augmented reality, mixed reality, is because of a little known app that they acquired, and they acquired the team last year. It was called Hawkeye. And now I'm gonna actually use it, and I'm gonna control my iPhone with just my eyes and a smile. So I'm gonna launch Google. And I just launched Google. And I'll go back. And I'll launch Amazon. Oh, I'll launch Amazon. There we go. And I'll go back. And I'll go to the next page. And I can go to Yahoo Sports. Oh no, let's go to Apple. And I can launch the Apple website. And I can go back. So I'm literally controlling it all with just my eyes and my smile.
Right? Start putting the dots together, you can start figuring out where things are headed. Here's a little speculation from the web. So just imagine if you take this and get it closer to here. Right? Apple tends to execute pretty well. They spend a lot of time on fit and finish. And something like this, or whatever their real version of it, is going to be really interesting to see as the next generation of what we do with our visual compute system once we've fully broken out of that rectangle. And now we're wearing our technology. As we wrap up, I'm going to show you a couple of other sort of fun things that I do. So now I'm going to sort of take a little departure and just spend 5 minutes talking about fun stuff, and then I can do some Q&A with you if you want. In addition to my work in mixed reality and virtual reality and all that stuff, I also spend a lot of time in other forms of the simulation world. And part of it is learning and spending a lot of time about 3D models, 3D scans, and turning real humans into virtual humans. So this is a small company that I work with that has had really good success taking a whole bunch of cameras, doing a high resolution scan, and turning that into something that we call a riggable asset that can be puppeted. So I literally spent about 10 minutes inside this truck with all these cameras. I did a couple of poses, what we call T-poses, my hands up, my hands down, and that was it. And I left. And about a week later, they made me do this. And trust me, I do not know how to dance, but my virtual Ted avatar does know how to dance pretty well. And if you look at the clothing and the textures of all this stuff, it's not like a video game asset. It's really me, like up until like everything, even the razor stubble and the fabric of the jeans and everything. They can also make lots of me. And because I know what I was wearing that day, it is exactly what I was wearing that day, right? And with more and more refinement of this, the separation between is it real or is it a photorealistic capture is we're starting to break down those barriers. And we think this is a really interesting thing to pursue. One more thing to show you, as we start to look at those layers of mixed reality, this is a company that I'm involved in that is using the iOS layer inside the smartphone, and eventually it'll be not in a smartphone, to actually bring performers into your living room. So that's the shoot, right? Shooting on the green screen with the cameras in a recording studio.
This is some of the experimentation and exploration that we're doing with a small startup out of San Diego called Embly that has an application that allows augmented video to be real and hyper photorealistic. So a couple days ago, we've been doing a lot of shooting and a lot of experimenting. A couple days ago, we shot a musical artist, a songwriter, singer named Joe Sumner. So I'm going to launch him on the app. I'm going to fire up the stage in our living room here, and it's looking for a stage to place him. And there he is.
Hi, I'm Joe Sumner, and I am
size him
a
up
singer-songwriter, and I'm here to support
and now you can see
creative
he's
visions,
basically in the living room, right?
awareness for the frontline workers during the COVID-19 pandemic.
And now I'm going to hand
I'm
off
going to play a song for you. It's called Hope.
the iPad, and I'm going to go sit and watch Joe perform. I'm going to go over there. Joe's over there.
I got money in my pocket, shoes on both my feet.
So step one, now, just like they made multiple me's, right? We can make multiple Joes. So here's 3 of them. Joe's not really there, but I'm there. And that young lady is there, who's all of 6 years old, 7 years old. I'm really there, but Joe's not.
Don't ask another question, don't tell another lie. Is it love that lasts forever, or the blinking of an eye? Hope, won't you come back to me? Hope, won't you come back to me? Hope, won't you come back to me?
See, I can literally stand there
and make us all believers and set my heart free.
Right? So if you kind of open your mind a little bit and imagine what is the future of music? What is the future of concerts? What is the future of personalization? What is the future of bringing a speech like this and me into your living room to discuss this with you, right? Or into your office to discuss it with you. Or if you're a Bruce Springsteen fan and you would love to watch a concert with the boss from your couch where the boss is right in front of you, right? Today, using the lens of the smartphone in the sort of magic window, tomorrow wearing something where your brain couldn't discern is he really there or not. That's the kind of crazy stuff that I get to work on. So as we wrap up, this is something to think about. Over the last 2 years, right, 2017, 2018, 2019, 90% of the data in the world was generated from the time that we were cavemen drawing cave paintings. The last 2 years, we created 90% of the data in the world. Let that sink in for a minute. Now, data usage has increased 47% during the pandemic. So if the last 2 years were 90% of all the data ever made, think about what the last 7 months have been of everybody using data for everything. Remember all those 6 or 7 companies that I said their valuations are going through the roof? They're now becoming trillion-dollar companies. It's because they are data-rich, data-centric companies. That's what they do for a living, and they have turned into the largest companies in the world. We are using it right now. We are demonstrating it right now on this virtual talk. So as we wrap up, if you want to take a screenshot of this, this is all the stuff we talked about over the last hour. So one time I did this speech in San Jose and they drew a cartoon of it. So I'm like, oh, we should take a picture of that. And then it's a good way to think about, oh, what is all the things he talked about over the last hour? There you go. And this, and I would show it to you if you wanted to see it, I would go get my wallet, lives in my wallet. It's a fortune cookie I got in New York City, a fortune. With time, the impossible becomes the impossible. That's what I do. I look at what most people think is impossible and show you that it's possible. That's what I do for the movie studios, and that's what I do every day. So that's an hour of your life that you're not getting back. So hopefully you liked it. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And hopefully you had a couple of drinks and you either got questions now or later. There's my email, my Paramount email, and my Twitter handle and all that good stuff. So thank you for listening.
That was amazing. Everything I expected. I do have 2 questions
Sure.
from people. The Nreal glasses, are they like Magic Leap or are they different?
They're different in some ways. I mean, there are pros and cons to each, right? So the Magic Leap device, which is here, is a more sophisticated, more compute-oriented device. It actually has its own little compute system. It's much more expensive. This is a $2,400 device. It's their first gen device. The sensors on this are more powerful. This we would say is a true mixed reality first gen device. It's not commercially successful, but it is very, very successful at showing us the future, right? But it still has a wire and this wacky thing you gotta wear and all kinds of stuff. The Nreal glasses are much lighter than the Magic Leap glasses. The Magic Leap glasses are very comfortable, but this is essentially an accessory for your smartphone, right? It does have some limited sensing of the world, but not where near as like a Magic Leap or a HoloLens. But this is gonna sell in the hundreds of dollars, and you'll be able to attach this to your iPhone or to your Android phone. Initially, they're focusing on the Android world. And it's like a wearable screen, right? That's much cheaper, and we're gonna see lots of value in these. So they both have valuable paths. One is more sophisticated, one is more pedestrian, one is more gonna find a broader audience.
Another question is regarding location-based VR, which is very popular, and I'm sure a lot of the people in the webinar have tested that out, like in the void.
Yes.
How do you see that really getting advanced in the near future?
I see the beginnings of this as the small little startup companies dancing around and trying to figure out where their business is, which doesn't have a tremendous amount of promise for the big time, but it's definitely showing us the path. I think what's going to happen is all of the big boys themselves, Disney, Universal, Warner, the companies that have big theme park operations, are going to figure out how to start to use mixed reality and virtual reality and start to embed that into their theme park environments at scale. And eventually, just like when everybody walks around a theme park today with a smartphone, when everybody in the future walks around a theme park with something like this, that magic can happen anywhere, right? Like, you don't need to queue up in a long simulator line to go on the simulator. This is your simulator. So
right.
I think, the LBE business is probably going to go the way of laser tag. It'll have some value and some economic prowess, but it's really going to be left to the guys that run massive theme park organizations to figure out how they utilize other environments to build on that business. I hope the startups do well. It's difficult for them to scale.
Very cool. Ted, we don't have any more time for questions, but this was amazing. I really appreciate you being here. I'm getting a lot of kudos from people.
I see a lot of people said thanks, so that's good. Thanks for listening. I appreciate it.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Ted. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely, my pleasure. You can see that I'm pretty passionate about this stuff, and I'm happy to answer, emails and stuff for anybody that might have more stuff. Questions on.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Big fan of anything that people want to learn. So education is a big part of why I try and do this stuff. So thanks for spending your time.
Great. I wanted to, before we leave, I wanted to let you know about our next scheduled speaker, Dr. Vidushi Bhattacharya, who will be speaking on October 22nd on entrepreneurial opportunities in the global outer space economy. Dr. Bhattacharya is a former NASA scientist and CEO and founder of AstroHub, a Singapore and US-based startup dedicated to space workforce development through training and education. Dr. Bhattacharya's previous experience includes over 2 decades with NASA on more than a dozen spacecraft, including the Hubble Space Telescope, the Galileo mission to Jupiter, the European Space Agency's Herschel Space Observatory, and other interplanetary missions. On October 22nd, she's going to deliver a fascinating overview of the rapidly growing commercial space sector and opportunities for young graduates in that industry. It's something that's you really shouldn't miss. So I want to thank everyone on behalf of Westcliff University. I want to thank everybody for being here. And I hope to see you on October 22nd for our next speaker. Thank you and goodbye.